lovely to see you all. Simon Moorcroft from St. Lucia, blimey, he's tuned in. Amazing. I hope you're enjoying St. Lucia, Simon and Jody. I know some of you, and some of you I have yet to meet. I think that's the best way I can describe this.
Oh,
there he is. So listen. No, I've just kind of like, I think the way that Zoom works, it's a slightly different format that I think is, for those of you not familiar, and I know that we've all been using this for 2 years now. As one person talks, it cuts everyone else off. So look, detailed answers, detailed questions, and a couple of points for those of you who may be wanted by the CIA or are watching this or interacting naked. I am recording this, and this will go out to patrons later on. So if you don't want to be recorded, either naked or clothed, or you are on a wanted list, then maybe kind of blur the background a little bit, and we can work on with that.
We're wanted.
Yes, you are indeed, sir. You are indeed wanted. So I want to just dive straight into this with the questions. And this is the question that we've had is to do with the engines. Now, the engines in on the 1370. Simon, can I just ask you to, if you haven't picked that up, just mute your microphone?
Yes. I'm just about to mute myself.
Perfect.
Thank you.
So at the moment, there are three options. There is they're all Yanmar. There's the 39, the 45, and the 57. Now, there was a discussion, and the whole reason that this discussion, that this format was kind of like, we thought we'd trial this, is based on us just not knowing the information. So I always want to come back to you and say, look, I've got an answer for you. This is either right or wrong. But then I'm sat there scratching my head. And completely coincidentally, I had a big meeting with Novella, who are the engine suppliers for Seawind in Croatia. And it just happened to be that Anna, the girl who works for them, just sent me all the information across a few days prior. So I'm going to start with this whole discussion on engines, engine weights, and why we have chosen this option. And then I'll move on to other options. And again, our choices. This is pretty technical. It's all going to be really technical. So apologies if, this is maybe not what you thought you were going to sign up for, but nonetheless. So look, let us just start. I'm going to try and share the screen with you. Can you all see this? Just let me know if you can. This has come straight from Yanmar and is the common engine series. Now, essentially, they only produce, Seawind produce data sheets for two engines or two sets of engines. One is the 45 and the other one is the 57. Sorry, the 40, and the other one is a combined 45 and 57. So they are both the 40 and the 57 and the 45 all run on a common rail engine block. The 40 and the 40 is a different size, and the 45 and the 57 are the same size. So the data sheet for the 45 and the 57 are identical. There is absolutely no difference. I have confirmed this with Novella, and I think one of the questions that was posed previously was, well, why is the fuel economy data the same for both? What I seem to find is that because they are exactly the same size engine, the 57s and the 45s are both 220 kilos. There is no difference in them at all. Now, that essentially means that they are increasing the horsepower either using a fancy engine management system or a different injector array. That is what I believe, because they are 220 kilos each. So there's no additional bits to it. So it leads me to believe that it is, it's got the economy data, the fuel economy data is the same. Now, has anyone got anything to chime in to kind of like refute that or say that they've got different figures?
Hey, Nick, this is Robin.
Hey, Robin, how you going, mate?
Good. This is my wife, Stephanie. And
hello, Stephanie.
I think the issue is that between the 40 and 57 for the same power, they should have the same similar fuel economy. But what I think is difficult is incorrect is it's showing the same different power for this with the same fuel consumption. So 20% more fuel consumption for the same power. And then there's another data sheet that Yanmar publishes that actually has different, it's literally a 57 data sheet that has a different economy diagram than the other 57.
I mean, all I can tell you is that Novella have sent me the latest data, and I'm assuming that they're up to date because they're the Yanmar supplier. Again, I cannot give you definitive answers because I am not Yanmar, nor am I Seawind. However, it does seem as if the data that I have been sent, and subject to confirmation of this, like being actually there is a Yanmar saying actually no, we have made a mistake, which I'm happy to accept they may have done. If they're using a different engine management system but the same size block, I can see why the torque would be higher, but the fuel economy would be almost identical, and that's what those graphs are showing. And I don't have anything else to kind of yeah. Hello,
Nick. Can I clarify something? This is Tyler and Sheila Syke from Washington. I think part of my confusion is that we're talking about the 45 versus the 57, same block.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think we don't have a 45 anymore as an option. It's the 40 or the 57s.
Yep.
So maybe people are getting confused that they're choosing an engine that looks like it has exactly the same fuel consumption and everything, when really the schematics seem to be comparing the 45 and the 57, which are the same block, but I don't think the 40 is the same as either of those.
Okay, so you are.
Is that correct? Am I correct in?
So the 40 and the 57 are two different blocks. They're totally different blocks, different torque, different everything. I'm not sure. I mean, I wasn't sure when I came to this whether Seawind was still offering the 45 or not. If you say that they're not, or that's what your dealer's saying, then you just have 40 or you just have 57. So you are looking at a different
right.
block.
I think our choice is to upgrade from the standard 40 to the 57. And I thought that I was told they chose that because the 57 and the 45 were essentially the same block. So why not just go to the 57?
Brilliant. And that is exactly why it's really good to have a collective talking today to be able to actually hammer this stuff out. Because the thing is that I'm assuming that you are in either the US or Canada, you're in the US, and that's what your US dealers are offering. So that's obviously something that the US are aware of. Okay, so look, let's just making the assumption that you're correct, that there are only two engine options now. One is the 40 and one is the 57. The weight difference is 23 kilos per engine. So you are looking at essentially, one of Teresa's shoe boxes, full of her, in weight difference. There's not a whole amount of difference in weight that you are going to gain. So the things that we're looking at, and I think that from our point of view, when we are at the point where we are hull 2, I'm not sure if Randy is on this call, hull 1, but there is so much that is, this is the theory of what the boat is going to be, and this is what it is actually going to be. And we are being overly cautious with weight based on just not having an actual boat to weigh. So regarding the engine choices and our engine choices, I just wanted to kind of clarify this, why we've gone with this. The 57, the increased power for us is huge. Now, I'm going to preface this by saying that I imagine that some 1370s will end up in charter, and they will be 4-cabin versions. And I would probably hazard that, we have been on different 1260s. We went on them last year. And I think that, if you're going into charter, you are going to specify the boat differently, because honestly, when we were in the Whitsundays sailing, the amount of shenanigans I saw with the charters, the charter boats, is absolutely insane. I'm just going to pick up, someone's just put a post in, isn't it? Yeah. So David has just said, there's a question that's come up about the weight saving. Yes. So 23 kilos per engine, that gives you 46 kilos, which is you offset that weight with the carbon coach roof, which is exactly, in theory. So back to the engines, the 57 for us gives us, from the point of view, if we were putting it into charter, would we go for 57s? I think probably it's fair to assume that if the 40s and the 57s were exactly the same cost, then we'd all have the 57s. That's just a no-brainer. I can't see that anyone at any point would say, actually, no, I want the smaller engine. From our point of view, and I can only speak for our choices, a couple of points based on real life experience. And there is someone in the WhatsApp group that posted this the other day, and there is a link that's going on about that. And I'm not going to bang on about the Neil 51, about how essentially the theory of how they built, what engine they required to drive that trimaran, and the actual practical, how powerful, how much power they could generate, they were completely different. So from our point of view, putting a larger engine in does a couple of things, or putting larger engines in does a couple of things. Number one, it means that we can run one hull. So one engine, one hull, and that's it. And that's all we're going to have, because facing the reality of what we have done over the last 7 years, there is a lot of time where you are going to be motor sailing. It's just the way it works. You know, it's not all champagne sailing. And night sailing, one thing that we had with Ruby Rose was that there was engine noise. And engine noise is a big thing, and keeping the boat as quiet as possible means that you get better sleep. So you are looking at 3-cylinder versus 4-cylinder. I could probably tell you that when we, and this is subject to talking to Pirate Pete and Phil Copeland. Now, Phil Copeland has a 1260 with the larger engines, and Pirate Pete has a 1260, I think, with the standard engines. And there is a difference in noise and vibration between the two. That's just, it's we actually have practical experience with this. So noise, there is a difference in noise, there is, and there will be a difference in vibration. And I think that one thing that we definitely don't understand yet, but will actually report back to you on, is that we are having the lithium upgrade. Now, the lithium upgrade means that you get a separate alternator on the engine. So it's not the standard alternator. You will have engines, or at least one engine with 2 alternators on, and that's going to need increased torque to drive that alternator. So again, that's a consideration that I've almost 100% got this from Shane, that it's a separate alternator. I can confirm that from seeing the 1260 that we charted that had 2 alternators on the starboard engine, I believe. And so the extra torque is something that we need. So we want the torque. We want to be able to run the engine quietly. We also, and I kind of guess this is from our point of view, especially having sailed and motor sailed through France, where tidal ranges are huge. There are times when we always wish we had a slightly more powerful engine, where we're punching tide or want to try to get into a port before we lose the water. So that, from our point of view, is absolute. Those are the reasons why. And I think there is a playoff on fuel economy, but the extra torque means you can run them at slightly, you'll get the same, you'll be able to run them at slightly lower revs, get a higher torque, and thus the flip side to that is that you are going to get a higher range with the boat. So that's our rationale behind choosing these engines. I think that, for us, the weight offset is pretty straightforward. It's 46 kilos. We are trying to save weight across the boat, and across the boat is, there's lots of little things that I will talk to you about. I've got some topics to talk about. So that is our rationale. Does anyone have anything they want to chime in? If I don't,
Nick,
haven't already met you, just, yeah. Hey, Robin, carry on.
I was going to say, I think the confusion is I think everybody agrees that the 40 to 57, the reduced, the extra power, the extra torque, the extra, all the extra things that come with a higher speed. I think what kind of tipped me off at the beginning, or at least checked off my, that doesn't sound right boxes, is there was a webinar many months ago, and I think it was back in March of last year. And they were talking about get the 57s because there's approximately 20% more fuel economy. And I said, well, that kind of violates the laws of physics. And, again, with 120-year-old technology of diesel engines, trying to get literally 20% more fuel economy out of a higher horsepower engine seems rather fantastical. So that's when I went and looked and said, wait a minute, something doesn't look right with the charts. And I could see how that conclusion was made, that you could get higher fuel economy because of that. Yeah. And I think that's really the question.
So I think, so anecdotally, we were in Falmouth in England back in 2015, and we had just happened to be in a marina with Ruby Rose, and an identical boat pulled in, another Southerly 38, and they are rare as hen's teeth. So we got talking to the owners. They were on a similar passage to us. They went to the Caribbean, but the owner of that boat he was one of these kind of like nerds that I love, that was completely obsessive with data and real-time data on fuel economy. So he had like absolute like reams of data based on his logbook. So we were talking about, we had the Yanmar 39 horsepower, 3-cylinder, 3JH5E in, which I think is, they no longer make it. It's been superseded by like the 40. So basically what he was saying is that a boat of this size, with this hull shape and at this weight, with this engine in, has its most efficient point at 1800 revs if you are using a fixed prop. So the variables that you are introducing to work out real-time fuel economy cannot and will not be ascertained until you actually have a boat in the water. That's just, it's the apps. And we had it wrong. We were running the engine at about 2000 revs, and he's like, no, take it down to 1800 because that's what I've got now. And he had been with, he owned his boat for longer, and he was correct. So by dropping our revs by 200 RPM, we actually massively increased our fuel economy. Until you get a 1370 in the water, and until you actually start working with the hull shape, the drag, the weight that you've actually loaded your boat up with, real-time fuel economy data is not going to be available. What I would say to you, and that is the joy of this group, and the joy, and I get this is pretty self-serving, that we have a boat that should be ready in 5 or 6 months, is that we can get this data back to you. I'm pretty obsessive about like logging things like this. So I will be able to say to you, look, these are the fuel economy figures that we're getting. And I think that reverting back to you at some point, and I guess that, you know, if all of you are interested in this, then we will come back, you know, and schedule a lot of these Zoom conferences just to go through like how we're finding things. It's going to be much easier while we're waiting for a boat to be built, and possibly not as easy once we're kind of like sailing in the middle of the Indian Ocean trying to get a Zoom link from like Elon Musk's ways of doing things. But so yeah, I take on board, Robin, that there is a head scratching moment about the theoretical fuel economies. I will revert back to you once we have a boat. Does that make, is that okay?
Yeah, no, that's great. I think ultimately, I think knowing the fact that we're going to have some 40s, we're going to have some 50s, and we'll be able to get some great comparison. And I think that's the pleasure we have of being hole number 40. So we'll learn from all of you guys.
Yeah. Okay. No, I've just got another question about weight, and I think there's going to be a lot of discussion about weight over this conference, about the flatter hull shapes and how they are going to be, how that is going to change the weight sensitivity of the boat. Now, from the outset with the 1370, Shane said this boat is going to be less sensitive to weight than the 1260. And I'm not a naval architect, but it does make sense because the way he explained it to me is as follows. Firstly, the flatter hull shape, essentially it's physics. It's essentially pressure, which is force over area. If you have a V-shaped hull, and you load it down, it will sink more, and you have a higher, wetter surface area. If you have a flatter hull and you are creating speed, you are going to get some amount of lift there. So I can get the physics of why he says that it's less sensitive to loading. And also, I think that the distance between the two hulls has a slightly higher ratio on them than 1260, and widening that space allows you to load it more. So does that answer that question? Whoever's asked that. Anyone want to chip in?
Yeah, it does, Nick. I was just curious on that, what your thoughts were just seeing that, because you seemed really surprised in the video when you saw how flat instead of the camber that the 1260 has.
I mean, look, all I would say to you is about the whole 1370 is that they have used a completely different design and a different way of doing things, but I believe with a very high degree of certainty that a lot of the, well, it's not, I know, but not I believe, I know that they made a lot of modifications to the 1600 passage maker based on what had happened when they kind of went through the whole design process for the 1370. And the 1600 passage maker exists. So essentially, the 1370 is not, in my opinion, a smaller 1600. The 1600 passage maker is a larger 1370, and they have taken a lot of that technology, and I believe that it will be extended across the line. So the kind of the new flatter hull shape is something that, you know, if you, I don't know where the 1600 passage maker is, whether it's in the US or whether it's gone to an owner somewhere else, but they have widened those hulls, and I believe that they've changed the rocker on those as well. But again, I know that they've definitely widened the hulls, and I think if you look at the 1600 passage maker video, they said that I think they made them about 200 millimeters, about 8 inches wider, and it seems to be working for them. So they have got a loading capacity. I mean, I met the team, the whole naval architecture team. That there is science behind it. There is always going to be a difference between the science and the reality, or the theory and the reality, but it all seems as such to just completely hold up. So I have no concerns about the flatness of the hull. I think it will be interesting to see how Shane's whole kind of like working theory that the penalty at low speeds is not going to be that extreme. And having so I kind of think that he's probably right, but I think that, you know, again, we will revert back and get back to everyone and say, look, yeah, low speed, fuel economy, low speed, you know, we're not creating that much drag, because I think the whole thing about it is we got some blowback on that video from people that, you know, sometimes you do get some negative comments, people saying, you know, the boat isn't going to plane. Yes, of course it's not going to plane. You know, I don't think Shane ever alluded to the fact that it was going to be a planing boat, but you do create lift. That's exactly what you do. And the whole thing about dagger boards in other boats is that if you've got a curve, it creates vertical lift. Then that doesn't mean it's going to come flying out of the water, but it does mean that if you decrease the wetted area by a small percentage, you decrease friction, and therefore you get a boat which is more fuel efficient and, you know, is going to go faster because you don't have that drag. So I have absolutely complete confidence that this works. In addition to that, you know, Seawind aren't the first boat to do this. It's not as if they've like literally thought, you know, gone out, drunk a load of like Vietnamese beer and come up with some theory. There are other boats, there are other kind of like performance catamarans that are moving to a different rocker shape and a flatter hull shape to create less turbulence and thus kind of like just, you know, decrease resistance in the water and thus increase performance. So I have absolutely no doubt this is going to work. Does anyone have anything to chime in on this? No? No? Okay, brilliant. So that kind of whole thing is weight, and how I wanted to kind of discuss the weight of the engines and other parts of keeping the weight in the stern. Now, again, we are very aware of trim and how keeping weight in certain areas, you know, can affect the trim of a boat. Now, from our point of view, I know that a lot of you, can you just let us know how many of you are going with the carbon coat roof? Are you all yay, nay? Yeah? Yeah. So I kind of think, look, the way I look at this, just generally, as I said with the engines, if everything was free, we'd all do it. You know, if it was like, oh, carbon coat roof, no, that's, you know, buy one, get one free. So like we'd all have the carbon coat roof because we are looking at a significant saving. Now, whether you consider 56 or 54 kilos to be a significant saving, I can't, you know, that's just, it's a personal thing. From just coincidentally, what you gain with the engine weight, you save with the carbon coat roof. In addition to that, regarding weight saving, we are also trying to keep weight down at the stern. I think, again, this comes from experience, because I know that 1260 is far, far more sensitive to weight and loading, but the dinghy that we had on one of our charters it had a really big engine on it, and it was too heavy for the 1260, and it did submerge the sterns a little bit. And the performance, really did notice a difference in performance. So from our point of view, that is a balancing act, because the other 1260 that we chartered had a small dinghy, but only a 6 horsepower outboard on. Now, again, this now turns into a decision that we've made based on experience versus the theory of weight at the stern of a boat, and in addition to that, experience with these two charters. So let me run through these principles first. When we got to the Caribbean with Ruby Rose, we had a very small dinghy with I think we had a 4 horsepower engine on it, which was like, it was bloody useless, absolutely useless. We then upgraded to a 6, which was the most that our flat bottomed. I think we had a Hon Wave with an inflatable V floor, but that was the most that we could do with that. But it became patently obvious that when we got to the Caribbean, that a 6 horsepower engine and a 2.5 meter dinghy was just not going to work, because the distances that we had to travel in the dinghy were far higher. So we poodled around in that dinghy for about a year, and then moved, when we got to St. Martin, because it was a TAC-3 port, we moved to an aluminium bottomed AB rib. I think it was a 3 meter rib with a 15 horsepower 2-stroke on. Now, that, I think the weight of the 2-stroke engine was about 23 kilos. The weight of the rib was 33 kilos. Now, that was about as light as we could get. So anecdotally, regarding the dinghy, number one, I will never own a 2-stroke engine again, ever. It was, honestly, I spent more time fixing that bloody engine than anything else, because essentially the reasons are that, two reasons. Firstly, petrol or gasoline that you get in the Caribbean, or even in Europe now, has ethanol mixed into it. And that, combined with the fact that a 2-stroke has to have between 2 and 4% oil put into the mix, means that the carburetor jets just block all the time. So it became like literally either one of the jets would block and the engine would either cut out at one rev or the other rev. So I probably at least once a month, I was on, there's videos of this, cleaning the carbs out, and I was so good at it at the end, I probably could have done it. It's like one of those things that, like Full Metal Jacket, when he can take apart an M16 blindfolded and put it back together in about 3 minutes. I could take that carburetor apart in absolutely no time. So I won't ever own a 2-stroke again, which essentially means that I have to move to a 4-stroke. And there is a massive weight penalty for that. So that's one thing that we have to consider. Additionally, because of what we want to do, and I had a really good chat with some friends of ours who had a child. They were sailing around the world with a child. Now, back many moons ago, while I was working as a dentist, I'm sure I've told you this, but there is a reason for it. I ruptured a disc in my back, and so I've always been really kind of worried about my back. And now that I've hit 50, I'm doubly worried about my back. It's all kind of like, so the whole point about this is that having a pull start is not what I want, especially where you use it like a car. For people that sail at weekends or people that just don't use the boat that often, a pull start is great, but I want an electric start. And that again adds, and having an electric start will once again add weight to the engine, because the smallest engine with an electric start, I think, is the 20 horsepower. The reason I was kind of alluding to friends of ours that had a child is that they always said, in an emergency, you want an electric start. You want to push a button and the damn engine starts. You don't want to be putting it and yanking it. And so the concessions to weight that we have to think about is, well, there are some areas where we could go lighter, but we're not going to be able to go lighter. And that area for us is the outboard. definitely. I will never, as I said, I'll never have a two-stroke again. And I think they're illegal in Europe now. I'm not sure if they're still illegal. Does anyone know if you can legally buy a two-stroke engine in the US? A new one. I know that you can buy used ones, but does anyone have that information?
You can't buy one new.
Nope.
No. Okay. So that's off the car. I mean, but you can buy them in the Caribbean. So that's a given. You can buy them in the Caribbean. So I'm just trying to, so yes, so four-stroke engine. So there's the weight penalty there, electric start, weight penalty there. And I guess, again, from our point of view, what we have done over the course of the last 7 years is work out how valuable a dinghy is to us. Now, in the Caribbean, you're going to want to be doing passages that are 2 to 3 miles. And that is because it's a few reasons. Number one, sometimes you just don't want to be at the local anchorage. Number two, sometimes you just can't get into the local anchorage or the holding's not good. I know that, I know Simon's still listening. Simon's in St. Lucia, that the holding off Rodney Bay, the anchorage is awful. You should really kind of like anchor off. And so a bigger dinghy for us is absolutely invaluable. So we are doing something which may seem counterintuitive. The first thing is that we are going to go with the smallest dinghy that we can get, which is a 340 rather than the 360. The 20 centimeters doesn't make much difference, but there's only 2 of us plus, the occasional crew. We are going with the 20 horsepower engine because, as discussed, I want a 4-stroke, I want an electric start, and we're going with the center console. Now, again, this is all to do with just comfort. I don't want it to look like an absolute, pimp my ride, but having lived on board for so long and we use the dinghy like 2 or 3 times a day. And for us, it really is a whole thing about being comfortable when you're sitting and not twisting your back and being sat on one of the tubes to kind of go ashore. The other thing about that is it's also with wet feet. We've had a couple of questions talking about like having single skin dinghies and having a single skin floor. The amount of sand and water that gets into those dinghies, if you live on it, I think a single skin you can save weight there, but I would never, ever, ever kind of like consider that. So that's kind of like our thought process about dinghies. And a question has just popped up about Corian. Now, yes, I absolutely concede that having Corian on a boat is weight that is unnecessary. So there is this kind of play-off. Yes, tell me.
This is John Till, we're hull number 6. I just wanted to let you know that the Yamaha new one that they just released, outboard, it's a 9.9 horsepower. It has an electric start. That
may be an option. What I would say is that a 9.9 isn't going to do much with a dinghy with more than 2 crew in. And I think that we found that we had friends with a 9.8. You can just about get that on the plane if you have 2 people in it, but if you have crew, you can't. So there is, and I think that probably if you are, it's really difficult regarding dinghies and engines because everyone says you need to go and actually experience them. And again, anecdotally, when we bought our dinghy and outboard the same day, and our friends bought their dinghy and outboard the same day as well, but they went with a slightly smaller AB dinghy, and they went with the 9.8 horsepower engine rather than our 15, and they took it back and had it restocked because she said it was just too unstable. So the point I'm trying to make for that is that it's the theory of how a dinghy is going to perform is probably very different from what the dealer will tell you to the reality. But my take on this is that a 9.8 for anything more than 2 people is going to struggle. and you are going to have to go with a pretty light dinghy, like one of the super lights, the ABs. So that's one thing to say. Regarding the Corian, I'm going to start by saying that for us, it's an absolute no-brainer. Like, we would never, ever not have it. It is the focal point of this boat is going to be the galley. And there is no way, and this is personal opinion, there is no way it is going to look as good after a year if you have a plastic galley as a Corian galley. And that, again, I know that on Ruby Rose, we had Corian, and obviously it's a monohull, so there is a weight. It's less weight sensitivity. But it looked as good on the day that we sold that boat as the day that we bought that boat. So I know that there is longevity. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that we had two 1260s chartered, and plastics, it doesn't matter what you do, it scratches. You put anything down, it will scratch. So from our point of view, aesthetically, I think there is 8 or 9 square meters of Corian on this boat. And if you've only got to look at the renders just to see how much of a feature it will be. There's a breakfast bar. I mean, how or why would you have a plastic breakfast bar, on a boat? I guess if you're going into charter, it's one thing. But again, literally, we leased our apartment out in London, and that's, so thanks, darling. That's some reason, we've talked about that before. Literally, the tenant has left, and the amount of damage that they have done to the boat, to the apartment, compared to us that we would have had if we had been kind of living there on our own is mind-numbing. So I think for the whole point about chartering, people not using, I mean, God, it makes me shudder to think about it. People not using chopping boards to cut things and just, So the Corian thing, yes, I know there's a whole weight thing. However, this is in mitigation. James, who is the production manager for the 1370, they have moved away from their initial, we're going to use 12 mil of Corian. They are now, I believe, going with 6 mil Corian, which is laminated to foam core, which halves the weight. And the other thing about this is that they have, I think, done some basic calculations on Corian by saying there's going to be 9 square meters of Corian, and if it weighs X per square meter and it's 12 millimeters thick and there's 9 square meters, and that's what the weight you're going to get. I actually hope, and there is probably, this is 50-50 hope and 50% kind of like intelligent thought, that the weight of that Corian will be less than half of the predicted weight. That's one, based on what James has told me, that they are moving to a much lighter Corian because of its bonded. And again, we had a discussion, I think, on here maybe probably about 8 months ago. Is someone calling their dog with the microphone unmuted? Obviously, I have this massive urge to sit up and beg.
Yeah. Hey, Nick, this is Ryder. I'm just wondering, do you know if there's going to have fiddles on the Corian if you get that as an option? Just to keep stuff on the counters?
I hope it does. Yeah, absolutely hope it does. And the whole thing about this is that we will be the first. I know that Randy's not having Corian, and I know that we are. So we will be able to show you. And I'm going to go in. And this is one reason why. It's not that I have any distrust of Seawind at all. I don't. I have absolute faith. I genuinely will take this boat, having never seen it. But I will have a discussion with them about fiddles and the appropriate use of fiddles and routing out draining space and other bits and bobs. So we will be the first boat to show you the Corian, and at that point I will have a weight for you. I'll be able to show you what it looks like. And I'm not saying that design won't evolve, because hull 2 is going to be a different incarnation to hull 84. We saw this with the Southerly 38. We had hull 37 and we were very, very different from hull 30. The boats evolve. So fiddles, I will imagine there will be gentle fiddles. It is, after all, a catamaran and not a monohull. We had wooden fiddles on Ruby Rose, but again, completely different boat, and subject to a lot of rolling. So the whole thing about the Corian is that I believe that they have not taken into account things like, for instance, the cutout for the sink, which essentially is going to lose about 60 centimeters, and the fact that now they are working with half the weight bonded to foam core. And again, we live on the boat, and again, the whole thing is just about how it's going to look. I mean, we don't have an eye on trying to sell the boat ever, but I'm kind of pretty meticulous about how I want to look after our things. And one issue that we've had from the outset with Ruby Rose was keeping anything free of scuffs, and especially things like, and someone said, yes, it's not plastic, it is epoxy. It is GRP. So they're just, yeah, nomenclature, it will be an epoxy, I believe, top. But the scuffs that we got on Ruby Rose, just from like fenders, you know, you get dust on fenders, and using, from our point of view, using anything on a non-mineral work surface is it's gonna, to me, it's not gonna look as good after a year. But agree 100% that it is an absolute personal choice. But if you look at the renders of the 1370, there is a whole lot of work surface to see. And I want that to be like, you know, looking bloody good. I mean, this is the whole thing. They have put so much effort. I mean, I was talking to Jay Nolan. When I was back in London, back in October, I went to see him because he lives about an hour from my parents. They are putting so much effort into things like, do you like this tap? What do you think of this tap? And I'm like, sorry, faucet to Americans. So, you know, but, you know, they're putting so much effort into getting these little things to make them look really good. I kind of think that I'm just, I wanted to, I wanted to make sure it looked as good as it could. So someone says, John says, the polystone does scratch. Yes, everything does scratch, yeah, but it is more resistant. It is more resistant. Heidi and Franny has asked about the workshop, and I think, talk a lot about the workshop. To the best of my knowledge, the workshop design has been finalized, and it is the one that we showed you, although there were two concepts going around. I wasn't going to talk about the workshop today, but I think, seeing as it's been brought up, I do want to talk about it. Firstly, it's beautiful. It is, you know, from my point of view, like it's a boat with a shed or a man cave. It's literally, and you will need to get this work. You will need to work on a boat. And I think that we are going to work pretty closely with Seawind to make sure that all the little things that I wanted from a workshop are integrated into this. So the fact that, you know, we are going to have, I mean, I'm going to work with Seawind, the shelving underneath the workbench. It is going to be made so that it will take a standard plastic crate, and I think they come in standard sizes. The reason for that is that the crates break. You know, you overload it, or you snap a handle, and so there are. And again, this is anecdotally, but also from experience, you know, the amount of times that we had tools in plastic crates and then you break one because you drop something in it or something punctures it. So I did want those to almost be sacrificial. And again, you know, for instance, probably half a dozen times, and this is probably my own laziness, I had one crate which had like tubes of grease or oil or something in, and I'd stack it too hard, and then I'd end up with like oil in the bottom, some sort of fluid in the bottom of the crate. And at that point, it's easy just to get a new crate. So there's things like that I really want to work with them to make a practical workshop. So the work surface for that, I don't know, but they are definitely building two versions of the 1370, and the workshop that we are having is an optional. It's an upgrade. I think it's not a standard option, because there are things that we are going to want. We are definitely going to want drawers for dedicated tool storage. We are definitely going to want the shelving for plastic crating that is we can replace or change. Or like, for instance, if there's, you know, some people may want, say arbitrarily, there's 3 shelves and each shelf can take, you know, 60 centimeters wide. Some people may want smaller plastic containers for, say, screws and nuts and bolts or chandlery items. So it's more customizable, and I think that's important because everyone's going to want different things from their boat. And what I do know about the work surface, I don't think that will be mineral because it's invertible, and that inverting part allows you to take a vise, because you do need a vise. So things that we are definitely going to want are a vise for fine work. We definitely want articulating lights. And the reason we want articulating lights is because I don't want to cast shadows over work that I'm doing and not have the ability, because that actually, I found that to be a real problem with Ruby Rose, that if you're trying to solder something, if you can't, if your shadow's in the wrong place, it makes it far more difficult to work. So articulating lights, and obviously things like power sockets and the like. So those are things, yeah, those are things with the work surface. Does that answer everyone's question about the workshop? David says there is no workshop option currently on the price list. Yep, that will probably come. And again, I'm not Seawind, so they'll get back to you on that. And Randy says we do not need an additional bunk and are having a different shop design. Okay, I know that they had 2 designs. The last time I talked to Shane, he said that the what was being standardized now was what we are having. So again, but subject to things changing, and things do change. I think there is, it's all work in progress. Carbon coat roof, I think we've talked on that. I think we've talked very briefly on that, that it is, I think we would all probably say, well, if it was all the same price as the regular one, we'd have it. So I think there's nothing else to say on that matter. It literally just comes down to cost. Axel has asked, can you speak about the size and weight of the dinghy that is recommended? I think they are offering the 360 and the 340. We are going with the 340, only just to save the extra 5 kilos. And I know it's a bit pedantic, but we don't need 360 for the two of us. That's just it. Another thing we're going with, and again, is the 8mm chain. Now, there's been a lot of questions on this about why moving to an 8mm chain from a 10mm. The weight saving there is huge, and a couple of points. Firstly, I think we are getting 60 or 70 meters of chain, or 60, 70 or 80, I can't remember exactly, but you do between reinforced G7 8mm and the standard 10mm chain, you save a lot of weight, and that weight is in the middle of the boat. So, the savings there are huge. The weight savings there are huge. There is a question as to whether or not you need to lay out more chain to keep the shank of the anchor on the seabed. Now, essentially, I don't think that is the case, and that is based on my understanding of anchoring and also practically anchoring for years. And again, unless you're in an absolute blow and you are trying to, keep the boat from, dragging. Firstly, it is all to do with the quality of the anchor. You need a damn good anchor, and I think, seeing as we are live, I'm not going to besmirch any brand of anchors, but the first anchor that we had on Ruby Rose, it was useless. And I remember, chartering a few boats. No, sorry, seeing charters in the BVIs, and the anchors are massively undersized. And I remember saying to them, this anchor's too small. And they're like, it's only really, we call it a lunch anchor. And I'm like, what does that mean? I'm like, well, it's best used for lunch, but it's not meant for overnight anchoring. So the anchor that they're using, the Saka, I have no problems with that. The reviews look really good. Again, the anchor chain, it keeps, what my friend Shiner, who is the bastion of all wisdom, when it comes to most things maritime, says that in anything but, really strong conditions, it's actually the weight of the chain that just keeps the boat in position. Now, I think that really from that point of view, we always tend at night to put out 5 times scope. If it blows up 6, and then, if it's really, really blowy, it, will increase that. So I think from our point of view, it's important for us to have enough scope in chain to be at anchor. We always have 10 meters. I always kind of like, it's just an easy thing to come up with. We want 10 meters. So we need 60 to 80 meters. The reason I say 10 meters is that 10 meters is about the depth that I would comfortably try and retrieve the anchor myself if I had to dive on it. And I think that's important, that you do have to think, well, can I get down to that depth if I get the anchor snagged? And 10 is achievable for me. And also, once you get past 10 meters, you are looking at carrying a lot of chain. Now, again, from experience, 7 years of doing this, and also people say, South Pacific anchorages are much deeper, you need more chain. We've sailed with Nikki and Jason, and they seem to say that it's about the same. You occasionally will find very, very deep anchorages. But the other thing about deep anchorages is that they tend to have a little bit more swell, and so you tend to try and avoid them if you can. So I think a deep anchorage would be necessity rather than, the choice we would make. So from our point of view, a good anchor and a good swivel is super important, like probably more important than the chain. Reducing the weight of the chain is huge. And having rode, I think we had about, 40 meters of rode on Ruby Rose. We never used it. And the reason we never used it is because it's theoretically great to try and get rode through a windlass, but it's not always. Windlass has got a gypsy, which is designed to take chain. And if you move between the two, it's a sort of thing where you're never going to really need the rode, but if you ever need to retrieve, if you've ever got that much anchor chain out that you're now on rode and then you need to retrieve it, there's a probably higher chance that you're doing it because things aren't going well and you need to move. And I don't want to be in that situation. So for us, we definitely wanted more anchor chain than, we wanted to go with a more chain, and we definitely wanted to try and cut that weight down. And I'm just going to see there's a question coming. Okay, so John and Sonia said, we are hull number 6 understand that the start date has moved from the beginning of April to March. So they brought the start date forward. I'll talk very briefly about what my understanding of that is, but I'll just ask the second part of your question. I'll answer, which is the standard chain is 55. Are you upgrading to 90? We're definitely upgrading to. We're definitely upgrading. I think if it's 90 or 80, but it's definitely not the standard length. Because essentially 55 is not going to be what we want. And again, it's just, this is experience. And again, for any of you who have chartered anywhere in the Caribbean or elsewhere, for instance, you will probably understand the bun fight that occurs at about 3 o'clock in the afternoon when people are trying to get into anchorages. There is always like this whole, I need to be as near to the beach as possible. I need to be as near to the beach. That creates problems. And the number of times I've seen irresponsible boat owners like screaming into an anchorage, like at 7 knots, because there's a space where they want to be. And there's swimmers in the water, there's kids in the water, and then it gets into this whole thing where people don't have the experience or the consideration to anchor effectively. And then you get into a situation where your anchor chains are crossed. There's all sorts of shenanigans going on. So from our point of view, we tend to just not want to be as close to the beach as possible. We want to just sit out, let everyone else get on with their get on with their anchoring. So we always tend to be furthest out. And that has provided us with, it's easier to just let people fight for the space nearest the beach. And so for that reason, longer chain because it's deeper, and also bigger dinghy, because as soon as you have a dinghy that really is not, can easily cover those distances, your anchoring spot and where you anchor for the night becomes far less dependent on, being close to the beach. So that is that, and we've learned that from experience. Someone saying the video is occasionally glitching. Vietnamese internet is not brilliant. Apologies for that. It is, it's patchy. So we'll do what we can. There's not a lot I can do with this, but I can, this will all be recorded. So I'll put this all out. I'm not sure if it records me or records who's on the screen. So I'll have to look at the recording. And if it's all your smiling faces, I may just put an audio thing out, seeing as you don't, because otherwise it's just going to be like an hour of everyone nodding at me, which is great, but I'm not sure it's what everyone else wants to see. Regarding another feature that we've had, and then I'm just going to open this to any questions that you have. And one thing that I think that we've had a lot of questions on is reinforcing the cleats. It's an absolute no-brainer to reinforce those cleats. We were in Valencia Marina, and we saw cleats just being pulled out of catamarans, just to the snatch in there. They are, I think the reinforced cleats for us are more to do with reducing snatch than actually from drogue deployment. But in the case that I ever would need to deploy a drogue, I would not ever want to be in a position where I'm kind of thinking, I wish I'd reinforce those cleats. And essentially, they're backing plates and they're still backing plates and glassed in. But the problem is that, if you do end up in a marina where there is swell and you are on a cat and you have your mooring lines tied to the cleats, and you will pull them out the deck, and that really put the wind up me when you kind of see, I think it was, I'm not going to mention the brand, but it was a very expensive catamaran having its cleats pulled out. And then, the damage that you do is ridiculous. So so the one final thing that we have definitely said to them is, look, we need to get we want the cleats reinforced. But again, the whole talk about the cleats is a lot to do with our drogue attachment. It's in case you ever need to run a drogue. For us, there is a second, more practical application, and that is not having your cleats pulled out the deck. Because the whole problem about having a cleat pulled out the deck is that you've then got to do a lot of work to put it back. So that's just another thing. So I kind of think those are the topics I wanted to cover in today's chat. Does anyone have any burning questions they want answered? And I can kind of run through the answers with you as I know them.
Hi, Nick. This is Tyler again. I noticed in your video that it seemed you were going with the vanity in the master, and some people are trying to opt for an extra cabinet there. Was there a reason why you chose the vanity versus putting in the bigger cabinet? Was it you felt there was enough storage already, or what was the reason there?
Yeah, so our reasoning is that, again, even before we saw the 1370, as in we saw the boat in itself, we valued the space there over storage. Now, from our point of view, and again, this comes from, firstly, because we run a YouTube channel, apparently, we have to work from the boat. And a lot of people do work from the boat. And I think that perception changes if you change the wording from vanity to office. And I think that is exactly where we are coming from this. This is where our office space is going to be. And again, from our point of view, like that vanity area will have power sockets, it will have USB sockets, and it gives us a place to work from. And I think that that's important because any of you, I'm not sure how many of you already own boats or will own boats, but you will all be aware that there is nothing that can't, there's no task on a boat that doesn't immediately wreck the entire interior of the boat, whether you're trying to find a screwdriver or find a pen or find a book or anything. You go from, I've just spent 3 hours tidying my boat to it looks like a hurricane's hit it and all you were doing was looking for a can opener. So I'm very aware that on boats, having an area to use for work or for internet or other things is really, really important. Actually, this is one thing which is subject to, it was an offhand discussion I had with Shane about the stern cabin in the starboard hull. That is big enough, and the way that the seating is big enough, the way that the modular seating is there, that would not be difficult to convert into like almost a television room. And I know it sounds nuts, but I think if you don't have the cabinetry under the bed, you could easily mount Shane's like, do you think you could put a TV here? I'm like, yeah, you could literally have this as an AV room. For us, I don't think that's important. But again, we value like zoning on a boat. And so having a galley, which is a galley, having a saloon, which is a dedicated saloon, and then a chart table, which is a chart table, and then the whole thing about the office and having an office that we can call an office. I mean, I won't use it for vanity. We've got literally, the heads is huge, but having that as an office with, it has a desk that you know, as a lifting lid or vanity unit, whatever you want to call it. So literally I can stop work, or we can stop work, put the laptop inside there, and it's done for the day. So that's our rationale for going with that. In addition to that, from our point of view, the amount of storage on that boat is, it's huge. And they have found storage where I'd never thought there was going to be storage. So there's a lot of really lovely surprises that I have had. For instance, the sliding door to separate the master hull from the saloon, they've built kind of storage shelves into that. While it's not a big thing, it's pretty thoughtful. That's the first thing. Second thing is that they have put, and this is in our latest video, they put shelving. They're building a shelving unit, which I wasn't expecting, underneath the area where the washing machine was. Now, this is accessible from the port hull. You haven't got to go into the heads. So there is more storage than we're ever going to need on this boat. So a question of, do we want extra storage? Do we want extra pantry space? Or do we value having an office? And in the same way that I put value, having lived on board for so long, in having a workshop, I see more value in an office. Does that answer that for you? Anyone?
Yes, thank you.
Perfect.
Hey, Nick. Nick,
yeah.
This is Robin again. Maybe just kind of going back to those reinforced cleats. I guess I was a little confused. I understand there's additional pad-eye for a drogue you can get as an option. Is there another option to reinforce the cleats as well?
To the best of my knowledge, and I'm speaking for as much as I know, I think that the cleats are glassed in with steel backing plates, if you take that as an option. But that is something that's how I understand it. If I've got it wrong, Seawind will confirm that. But it is to do with having steel backing plates on your cleats. Does that answer that for you, Robin?
No, got it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So we would have to ask for that then, is what you're saying. It's not going to be a standard item.
It is definitely an optional item to have reinforced cleats. Yeah.
Okay. I hadn't seen that on the options list.
I mean, it's not a difficult thing to add, but I definitely, because, I mean, look, it's just having seen cleats being pulled out of boats in marinas because of snatch, swell. It's not about drogue reinforcement. It's about keeping the boat secure in case you get swell come through from a storm or something. So that's just our way of looking at it.
Yeah, I think the it's not on the options list. I just looked at it today as far as the updated options list.
Okay.
So if it is something that isn't going to be standard, then we just need to figure out how we do that. Considering that I have to finish options like this weekend.
Yeah. Well, listen. I've seen it as an options list, so I'm not quite sure. I've definitely seen it on the options list. So revert back to your dealer, but actually, I'll have a chat with them. If I need to catch up with Jay next week anyway, so what I'll do is have a chat with him about it. But it's definitely I've seen it. unless they've removed it.
I mean, the droge option is there for upgraded, but I don't know that necessarily includes all of the cleats. My understanding is maybe it does.
And again, I can't speak with like absolute authority, but it is the drogue attachment points, and I believe that is part of that is reinforcing the cleats and other areas. So, I mean, notwithstanding, people do get caught out with drogues. So I think the primary reason for this drogue attachment or reinforcement is to allow you to tow a drogue, and I kind of think from our point of view, it's a safety feature. You're spending a lot of money on a boat, and it's going to be bristling with safety features. And so I think that as an option is, I think unless you're putting the boat into charter, I think that it's a no-brainer to have that one. And if you're putting the boat into charter, then you're a braver man than I, because there's just no way I'd let something that beautiful.
Yeah, you're killing me, Nick, because we are putting our boat in charter, and so all of you people that are interested, it's we are going to be putting our boat in charter, and it is nerve-wracking to say the least, but that's the one way that we can make it all happen. So,
can I just ask, are you going for the 4-cabin version then?
No, we are not.
Okay.
Because the ultimate goal is to actually be using it ourselves. So we've chartered other boats. We've chartered in Greece and Croatia and BVI and everywhere, a bunch of other places. And it's one of the ways that we can make this work on a time frame that works for us. And so we do understand that after it comes out of charter in 3 to 4 years or whatever, or as soon as we decide to take it out of charter, we probably will have to do some retrofitting and upgrading. So that is
Brian, not true. Yes, the boat's going to be out of Key West. So anybody who's coming after Hull 6, beginning next year in December, January.
So it will be in Key West, and we're out of Sailaway Catamarans is our broker, and we're just they're going to be, I think it will be at the Annapolis show the following year, but I don't know.
I mean, look, there's a lot of people that, to get across the line, that's how you do it. You put the boat into charter for a few years. And the US system is really geared up to that. I believe there's some tax breaks that allow you to kind of, and I think someone said that those, I have no idea about the American tax code. So, but, so it's just anecdotally, people have said that, there's that tax break was closing. So yeah, I get it. Get across the line while you can. I'm just going to see what other questions we've got, so then we can draw this to close. So David is asking about, okay. Fine. So the whole thing about 110 versus 220, we don't really have a dog in this fight. There's only America, the US and Brazil that run on 110, I believe. So, and the whole thing about this is, and I'm not going to suggest that on a boat as complicated as a 1370, you would do this, but you can use 110. If you've got a 220 boat, we have a 220 boat. We took it to America and you just rewire the shore power plug and plug it in, and it worked fine. You have to get I think a 30 amp pedestal. So, but yeah, I'm not recommending you do that. But when we got to the US, they're like, you don't need a 110. Step down transformer. So look, has anyone got any further questions that they want to ask, and I can draw this to a close? And then I think what we'll do is I'd like to get back to you all if there's any questions that I have the answers to. I kind of think that a lot of the questions that were put to me over the last few days, as I said in the WhatsApp group, a lot of it is just, these are questions that I can't answer, and Seawind have to answer them. And I'd never put myself in a position where I'm like making statements that I can't back up. So a lot of these are anecdotal statements based on, or experience statements, or things that I have actually been told like 100% by Seawind. So
I have a question. When
yes.
are you getting yourself out to the Caribbean, mates?
Well, actually, the whole thing about this is, Simon, that we hope to be there this time next year, depending on when the boat is finished. So yes, we will be hopefully across the Atlantic at the end of this year, and I will be there with you if you can get you still won't have your engines fixed anyway by then. So like I'll just swing by and pick you up in Marigot.
No, my wife has told me that we're not allowed to go to the Pacific next year. We have to stay here for another 12 months. So we'll hang around waiting for you, my man. And I can't think of a better reason for doing it.
Listen, Simon, all I would say to you about that is book your hurricane storage early. The hurricane storage facilities for a catamaran of your size, I'd probably go to Grenada because it's out of the hurricane zone. There's also a catamaran storage facility in Antigua, but it's not Jolly Harbor. So yeah, just book early. So yeah, get onto that. Way before.
For your listeners who may be interested, we have booked Grenada, and it's not a complete rip-off. And we have found insurance for Grenada, which is also not a complete rip-off. So to stay in the Caribbean for the hurricane season is not the disaster that some people would portray it as, which I think is quite important to say that, by the way.
No, absolutely. I think you'll find the novelty of temperature at around June, July in the Caribbean wears off pretty quickly. We got to the point in Antigua where it's just when you can't get into the sea and cool off because the sea's too hot, it becomes a little bit of a off-putting, and you start yearning for a British summertime. But I'm sure you'll be back in the UK at some point as well.
Anyway, we are so happy to see you in Vietnam, and good luck with taking delivery.
Thank you both. Thank you both.
Happy. No problem at all.
I'm just going to answer. Thanks, Simon, and thank you, Jody. Listen, I'm just going to answer one question about Jody. One question about insurance. We don't have an insurer yet. This is all something to do over the coming months. So we will get back to you. Our intention is to be a UK flagged yacht, and that does change things regarding insurance and where we can insure. Similarly, we have no answers on shipping or where we're shipping to or anything about that, but we'll revert back. And I'll take one last question just about the new factory. Yes, so Shane has mentioned they are going to hopefully be able to produce 23 boats a year. The new factory is huge. Everyone went back to work last Monday after TET, and they are going to be spending the next couple of weeks bringing that factory up to speed. Literally, they moved everything into that factory, I think the day before they closed for TET, which is why there's just 3 boats in there. So there's a lot of stuff that they need to do. But they are industrious, and I have absolutely no concerns about them not getting to that number of hulls per year. So yeah, no, that's exactly what we assume. So listen, I'm going to draw this to a close because I've been gassing for a while now. So thank you for this. I hope you found it useful. I have to edit this, and I'll try and put it out either as a podcast or as a video later. So look, I really hope you enjoyed it. I think that over the coming months, we're still 4 or 5 months away from our boat being finished. I think there are a lot of things that I am going to discover, or information that we're going to come across that we'll want to relate to you. And I think this is a really good format for just interacting with you. And I think the whole thing is that if we keep doing this and keep having these conversations, we'll get to know you all loads better, because obviously with the live chats on YouTube, they're kind of pretty one-sided, but it's really lovely to see see all of you. So look, I hope that you found this useful. What we'll do is give you the same notice the next time regarding when the chat is. I will try and get something maybe every now and that is more appropriate to our European viewers as well. So maybe it'll be a different time just across different time zones. But yeah, look, hope you enjoyed it. Really, really looking forward to the boat. And there's so much we can tell you using this way of interacting than using live streams and pre-recorded videos. So lovely to see you. Thank you for coming and tuning in, all of you. And we'll see you soon. So take care. Bye-bye.
I'm gonna love you, babe. Cross my heart and hope to die.